I recently had the pleasure of speaking with Antonio Centeno of Real Men, Real Style and Raphael Schneider of the Gentleman's Gazette. We are all from different generations. Antonio is Gen X, Raphael is Millennial, and I, of course, am Gen Z. I believe Raphael is going to post the full discussion on his channel next month, but something really struck me during our conversation that I've been thinking a lot more about. We were discussing the positives and negatives of being born in a particular generation. For Gen Zers, and particularly Gen Z men, I think there are 3 negatives that really stand out. I call these the 3 silent killers of our generation. In this video, I'm going to tell you what these silent killers are, how they are affecting young men, and what you can do to combat them. Rarely on this channel do I like to be dogmatic or overly pessimistic, but at the same time, I'm not afraid to tackle head-on issues that I see affecting men of my generation and limiting their potential. So let's begin with silent killer number 1. What might seem like harmless entertainment has turned into a crippling addiction for many young men. I don't have much personal experience with video games, but it only takes a few statistics to paint a picture of why they are so harmful for many young men. 3 to 4% of gamers are now addicted to video games, and gaming disorder is now a disease in the 11th edition of the International Classification of Disease, just like schizophrenia and depressive disorders. While 3 to 4% of gamers being addicted might not sound like a lot, it is when you remember that between 48% and 56% of young adults play video games regularly. In the US alone, that means we have hundreds and thousands of young men who are flat out addicted to video games. The next silent killer of young men is pornography. Now, I'm not anti-porn by nature, and I believe in the freedom to watch and distribute adult materials. However, pornography has become a negative influence on both the mental and sexual health of many young men. Porn addiction is even more prevalent than video game addiction, with 11% of men addicted. It's hard to imagine that a substance like a drink or a drug would be legal if 11% of the population were addicted to it. Perhaps the biggest problem with modern pornography is ease of access. An infinite library of high-definition, even virtual reality pornography is now available 24/7, and it's being accessed by children. Depending on which study you look at, it turns out that boys are now getting their first exposure to online porn between the ages of 10 and 12. This is way before they are able to have a healthy understanding of sex and relationships, and it's way before their brain is even fully developed. Over the last few years, the vortex of online pornography has only sucked men in deeper with the rise of OnlyFans, giving men a virtual girlfriend experience that's also very hard on their wallets. As I said, I'm not anti-porn, but I do believe the way most men are using it is completely unhealthy, and they would be better off without it. I'm actually going to be speaking to a sexologist in the next couple of weeks on the Gent Z podcast. We're going to discuss a healthy way to approach sex, pornography, and masturbation for young men. The Matrix is very overused as a metaphor in the manosphere, but I think it applies perfectly to video games and porn. Both of them provide just enough stimulation to keep the brain's pleasure centers happy and docile. Technology like virtual reality and constant access means these stimulants are more powerful and potent than ever. In the 80s, your dad might have played his Atari a little too much, or been a little too obsessed with Miss July, but there was a clear limit to the amount of pleasure and stimulation that these things could provide. They still left room to be hungry for real-world experiences and relationships. If you've ever read Brave New World, you'll know that the public can be just as easily controlled with pleasure as with pain. I fear that this is the society that many young men are living in. What's more, both video games and pornography are contributing to what I believe is the biggest silent killer of all, and that is loneliness. Gen Z is the first generation that can survive completely isolated from society. A young man today can exist by working from home, getting his food and everything else that he needs delivered, and relying on video games and porn instead of family, friendships, and dating. You see, pornography and video games only exacerbate this isolation because they feed that human need for comfort, achievement, and companionship, but in a very shallow and unrewarding way. However, there's a lot more to the male loneliness epidemic than this. The lockdowns of 2020 and 2021 cut a sharp halt in the social development of an entire generation. The colleges and offices where young men like me would have formed their strongest early social connections were shut down and replaced by screens. To give you an example, let me tell you about my experience with loneliness at this time. So my job at the time moved to a work from home position in March 2020. I was living with my girlfriend at the time, so it wasn't too bad. But then I left her in January 2021. We were in the middle of another lockdown in the UK. I stayed with my parents for a few months until I decided it was time to get back to London and rebuild my life again. So this was May 2021. But the London that I came back to was not the city that I'd known before. My job was still working from home, so there was nobody that I could socialize with at the office. All my friends from college had also moved back with their parents over the lockdowns, and they hadn't come back to the city yet. And the obsession with virtualization and Zoom made meeting new people very hard. It really was the loneliest time of my life, and I would hate to go back there. Fortunately, I didn't have any addictions with video games or pornography, but if I did, I can only imagine they would have dragged me down severely and made it very difficult for me to get out of that rut and rebuild my life by moving to the US. So far, this video might have painted a very bleak portrait of my generation, but it doesn't have to be this way. I want to give you some suggestions for how you can defeat these silent killers and create a more fulfilling life. Games offer the instant gratification of false accomplishments, but the real world is a much more exciting realm. There are new levels to unlock that translate to real-world, fulfilling rewards. Perhaps you leave the video games behind to join a sports team, which is a great way to meet new friends. You could also buckle down on your career, go after that promotion, or expand your professional network. Or begin a side hustle or business and make generating income your game. As for pornography, it's much better to trade that for real-life romantic relationships and interactions. That doesn't mean you have to go get married, and it doesn't mean you have to go and have a bunch of one-night stands. In fact, I wouldn't recommend that, but I do recommend that you download dating apps, practice approaching women in real life, and go on some dates. It's okay to take a casual and relaxed attitude toward dating, and it's okay if you go on a date with a girl that you don't really hit it off with. It's still better than beating off to a screen at home. Dating teaches you how to treat women, how different they all are, and how different women will make you feel. I remember watching Kevin Samuels say that incels are often overly romantic, and I think this is very true. If you're not aware, incel means involuntary celibate, and they are often overly romantic and childish about dating. I'll be honest with you, during the lonely period of my life that I told you about earlier, I didn't go on a single date with a woman for an entire year. And looking back, I was shooting myself in the foot. I decided that I didn't want to meet a girl on a dating app, so I wasn't on dating apps, and then I didn't meet anyone. Or if I did meet a girl in real life, I wouldn't take things a step further because I had a very clear romantic portrait of the girl I was looking for in my mind, and anyone that didn't fit that, I just wasn't interested in. If this resonates with you, I encourage you to ditch that Disney-like, overly romantic fantasy and just focus on meeting new people and having new experiences. And when they are the one, you'll know. As for loneliness, if you do all the things I've suggested, I highly doubt you're still going to feel lonely. Hobbies or your job will give you friends, and dating will fulfill that romantic need. But if you do still feel lonely, seek out communities of like-minded men. For example, I decided to create the Gent Z meetup group so that other men with similar interests could get together. The funny thing is, these men would have never met each other in any other way, but when you were in that group and everyone was talking, you would never believe they had just met each other for the first time. I know I was able to use my social media presence to advertise this group, but perhaps you could do something on a smaller scale. Antonio Centeno came up with a great idea during my podcast with him. How about starting a book club for self-improvement? If you have an interest or niche that's very specific, that's even better because when you advertise it online, people who share that interest are going to be very attracted to your community. There is a big focus on online communities these days, and they can be great, but nothing is going to cure male loneliness like genuine, real-life brotherhood. With that said, I'm happy to announce that the next Gent Z event is taking place in Chicago on June 11th. Whether you attended the first one or not, you are more than welcome to join us for this free event and meet some like-minded men. The first one was a great success and I was very happy with the venue, so we're going to keep it at the same location for now. You can get the event information and your invite by registering using the link in the description. Thank you for watching, I'll see you in the next one, and I'll see you on June 11th.